So without further ado, it's 5:02. Welcome to the Thursday, October 12th Nantucket Conservation Meeting. Permit me to confirm that all members who are present can be heard. Members, when I call your names, please respond in the affirmative. Mark Beal.
Here.
Tim Brain. I don't see Tim. I know his wife is in hospital, so perhaps he's not going to be with us.
Oh, wow.
Seth Engelberg.
Here.
Mike Mazzarelli.
Here.
Joe Plandowski.
Here.
Linda Williams.
Here.
Great. This meeting is being held entirely remotely, so all participants are participating via Zoom. The public may participate via YouTube. There are directions on the town's website as to how to join. If anybody wishes to speak, please raise your hand either in your camera window or virtually and wait to be recognized by the chair. Please state your name and any relationship you might have to the project before speaking. Please keep your device muted when you're not speaking so that you're not picked up by the recording or creating a distraction. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. We'll start the meeting with public comment on items not being heard this evening. Hearing none. Moving on to the public hearing, notices of intent. The following are continued. 46 Shimo Pond Road, Nominee Trust, 46 Shimo Pond Road, continued to October 26th. Somerset Nominee Trust, 14 Somerset Road, continued to October 26th. And Somerset Nominee Trust, 14 Somerset Road, continued to October 26th. So that brings us up to our first notice of intent, which is trustees of Reservation Cascada Cotu Wildlife Refuge.
All right, Mr. Chairman, that one's also continued to the 26th.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
It's all right. We got it late in the day.
That gets us to number 3 on the list, Killen 1 Old North Wharf. And so there we have it. So far away.
Okay.
Thanks, Brian.
No problem. Excuse me. Brian Madden from LEC Environmental Consultants representing the applicant. The proposed project involves 2 additions onto the existing building and some other related site improvements. The site is located within land subject to coastal storm flowage, elevation 9. The site itself is located greater than 100 feet away from the resource areas associated with the Easy Street Boat Basin. The one of the proposed structures there on the that's the east side, 385 square feet. That is going to be constructed on a crawl space foundation with flood vents. The first floor elevation is going to be elevation 11.2. Top of the foundation is 10.0, so it's that 1 foot above the flood zone elevation. There's some new entry steps to that addition. That addition overlaps with the existing lawn, landscaped areas, and a portion of the gravel driveway, portions of which are going to be retained to the east. There's a smaller 44 square foot addition on the south of the building. Because this is a commercial use, it does need to comply with Mass DEP stormwater regulations. And so Bracken Engineering had put together the stormwater report, and there's a proposed subsurface infiltration system to collect roof runoff from the structures. And that's been designed in compliance with the regulations, and some details are included on the plan. But with that, I'll turn it over to questions.
Thank you, Brian. Questions from commissioners? And Leah, if you could wait until I've heard commissioners, please. But hearing nothing, please go ahead.
Hi, Chairman. Leah Hill, Coastal Resilience Coordinator for the town of Nantucket. I just wanted to let the applicant know that the town has received a grant through Coastal Zone Management to start looking at the first phase of the downtown neighborhood flood barrier. So your application would be, you would be considered a stakeholder within that. So we don't know what it's going to look like yet. Whoever we end up hiring will come up with alternatives. And then through community engagement, town departments and permitting agencies, we will develop something there to help reduce the flooding on Easy Street. So just wanted to make you aware of that as you go through the process.
Appreciate it.
Leah, beg your pardon for my mispronunciation. So if I may ask you both, will this have any bearing on your calculations, Brian, or should it in any way, Leah?
I would have to see the calculations. I haven't seen them or read any surveys that have gone into it yet. So I'm happy to look that over and provide comments at a later time.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, I guess if the question is geared towards, does it affect the elevation of the structures? I don't think at the current juncture that will impact it for stormwater management purposes. I can let Don expand upon that as needed.
Okay. And before he does, Don, if you don't mind, Jeff has his hand up, as does Linda. Jeff?
Yeah, I think to add on to Leah's comment a little bit, I think Leah's comments were intended more of there's going to be a significant project in the area. I don't think it clearly won't affect, building code requirements or things like that right now. But I think as it's a pretty significant project for the downtown, the town wanted to take the opportunity just to hopefully make the applicant aware as they've engaged the town through the application process that this project may be going on. And we may be looking for feedback and interaction with the applicant in this as that project goes through the design phase.
Thank you, Jeff. And Linda, do you mind waiting until Don Bracken adds any comments?
Well, it was just, I needed to question the address because I did work on 1 Old North Wharf, but this is 1R Old North Wharf. I assume this is the bigger structure on the corner of Old North Wharf and Easy Street, which I did not work on.
No, this is the smaller gallery.
This is the tiny one with no bathroom, no heat, no nothing.
I believe so, yes.
All right, I need to recuse from this, Mr. Chairman.
So noted, Linda. Thank you. And Don?
Yeah, just to clarify the calculations that were done for the drainage system and the roof runoff, because it's in a coastal flood zone, Stormwater Management Act requires us to evaluate the 100-year flood, which we can't do in this case because it's already going to be inundated. So calculations were based on a 25-year storm, which is roughly where it gets before the floodwater gets to the grade, the 25-year storm event. So that's that, which is that's completely independent of flood zone requirements and regulations for the structures themselves. As far as those go, as Brian mentioned, the building code requires us to add a foot to the flood elevation for the design elevation. And in this case, the top of the foundation is at that extra foot, elevation 10. A lot of cases we can actually put the first floor at that elevation, but in this case is an extra 12 inches there of security. The existing building, because it's historic and because they're not doing work that exceeds 50% of the value of the structure, they can keep that at the same elevation. So that's why they're at 2 different elevations, and the addition is considered from a floodplain standpoint a separate construction. So
Interesting, thank you. So if no further questions from commissioners, are there any questions from members of the public? And seeing none, would you care to close, Brian?
Yes, please.
And Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes, sir.
Great. And thank you for your motion, Mark. And do I hear a second? Great, thank you, Joe. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye, with Linda Williams recused.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that brings us on to 64 Baxter Road Realty Trust with an address of 63 Baxter Road. David Haynes?
You think that's confusing? Yeah, it always is. This is a notice of intent to construct a swimming pool based to the house outside of the 50, in an existing lawn outside of the 50 feet from the top of the coastal bank. The most coastal bank is, according to CZM, is eroding at a rate of 0.07 feet per year. In other words, the 20 times the annual erosion rate would be 1.4 feet. So all structures will remain outside of the 50-foot setback. There will be a proposed pool. We're also moving a shed from across the street to house pool equipment. The pool will have a canister system, a closed canister system, and will not require back flushing. Basically, we did a test bed across the street for the pool over there, which is coming up next, and the water table was down 14 feet. So we don't expect to anticipate hitting groundwater. However, if we do, we will pump it to a shallow basin with a silt sack in it outside of the buffer zone. Don't anticipate that at all. This property was before you, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, to move the house. That's still a valid order. We had permission to pull the house back. Currently, portions of it are inside of 50, and we pull it back so it's well outside of 50, and that's still on the table. The work has not been done yet, but this work is just for the swimming pool and the shed that's being moved across. And if you have any questions, thank you.
Thank you, David. Any questions from commissioners? And seeing none. Seeing none, but I do see a member of staff putting his hands up. Vince, good afternoon.
Thank you, Ian. Vince Murphy for the Natural Resources Department. Very similar to Leah's comments on the last NOI. The town is in a butter. The town receives the notification of this application. We just simply wanted to make the point that, as everyone might be aware, there's a potential notice of intent in the offing with SBPF for geotubes in this area. We wanted to make the applicant aware of that. I'm extremely happy to wait until later to address questions on that, but I can answer questions now if needs be.
Well, then we'll speak at once. So personally, you're going to be before us later on this evening, right? Okay. So on that note, David, would you care to close?
If you have no questions, I would be happy to. Get me off your agenda.
Okay. Thank you.
No hard feelings, David.
No, I don't mean that.
Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes.
Thank you. A motion to bring it to a conclusion.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Linda. Seconded by Michael Mazzarelli. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. Thank you, David. This brings us on to the 64 Baxter Road Realty Trust, 64 and 66 Baxter Road.
And I'm still on your, and there are
There you
no,
go. There
um,
you go.
this
In the
is a,
firing line.
this is a notice of intent, to construct a house, a cottage and a swimming pool on this property that currently contains a lawn and tennis court. There's a bordering vegetated wetland to the rear that was delineated. It's a shrub swamp back there. It's a funny wetland that runs along the back between Baxter in the back of Baxter from here on up almost to the tennis court or to the life-saving museum. The lighthouse. So all work is outside of 50 feet. The pool will be outside of the 50 feet. The main house is almost entirely outside of the buffer zone. The cottage is in the between 50 and 100. That will be the limit of work. The swimming pool, there was a test pit done on this property, and showed the groundwater to be down about 14 feet. So no issues with the 2-foot groundwater separation from the bottom of the pool. All areas will be stabilized after completion. The pool will have a closed canister system, so there'll be no discharge of water coming out of the pool. There will be a cabana and there will be a patio around the pool. And basically that's it. No waiver required, no floodplain, no erosion issues. We're outside of 50, we're outside of 2 feet. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? And seeing none, any questions from members of the public? And seeing none, David, would you like to close?
I'd be happy to.
And Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes, you do.
And a motion to close from,
So move, I'll second Mark's motion.
thank you, Linda. Thank you, Mark. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. Thank you, David.
Thank you. I'll be back.
Okay. And that brings us on to amended orders of conditions. Daisy 14 Clover Lane, Brian Madden.
Thank you very much. Brian Madden from LEC Environmental, representing the applicants. So the amendment requests, as we discussed at prior meetings, we provided some updates. I'll review those, but this application includes the proposed pool. The minor mod is on the agenda later, which does not include the pool elements. Project updates as depicted on this plan before you include eliminating the pea stone patios, reconfiguring the final dry laid stone patio, extending the step stone walkway through within a lawn area to that reconfigured stone patio, relocating the pool equipment and generator to be screened with privet or fencing on the north side of the structure. We've proposed a hedgerow or screening buffer along the southerly property line in order to address the southerly abutter's request as it relates to noise. The AC units are along the southerly portion of the house. We have modified the driveway, the contours of the driveway slightly to ensure that there's no runoff entering Clover Lane. Effectively, there's a high point at the driveway entrance that drains back to a catch basin that's connected to one of the 3 dry wells that is being proposed to manage stormwater runoff. So that was also at the request of the abutter to the east, northeast. As it relates to the plunge pool, we did provide a little bit more detail. It's again 4.5 feet deep, 8 by 20 feet. It does maintain greater than a 2-foot separation to high groundwater. There have been soil logs performed on site. No groundwater was encountered beyond 10 feet down. We would expect that the commission would apply all typical pool special conditions as part of this request, in addition to exterior lighting, typical conditions directed away from the wetlands in compliance with the Chapter 102. And just to make a point that, so that potential wetland, isolated wetland across the street, there is no proposed work within 50 feet of that. Otherwise, the project complies with all the performance standards for the regulations, and no waivers would be required. And with that, I'll turn over to questions.
Thank you, Brian. Questions from commissioners? And seeing none, I believe that members of the public have something to say on the matter. Do I see any hands raised? I do. Natalie Kaufman, please.
Hi, thank you,
Hi.
Commissioner. So I represent the abutters Meadows at 8 Crow's Nest, which is the isolated wetland, and wanted to thank Act 2 for being good neighbors and putting in the driveway modifications to mitigate runoff. We really appreciate that. And we endorse the minor modification plan coming up later, but we do oppose a pool in the area for the reasons discussed the very first time this came up, in terms of just wetland and preserving the area. So that's the position from 8 Crow's Nest. Thank you.
Thank you. And Marissa Grennan.
Thank you. I represent Mr. and Mrs. Wagner of 12 Plover Lane, and for various reasons, including the procedural reasons that we raised at the first time, September 28th, that this matter was discussed. We feel that this is inappropriate for an amended order of conditions, but we also have severe substantive concerns about this project. We've submitted written comments that go into more detail, but in short, we think that putting a plunge pool at this location jeopardizes private well supplies for abutting properties, would have detrimental impacts on groundwater, would be detrimental to flood control for neighbors, and is just not a good idea in a neighborhood where every other homeowner has voluntarily agreed to not put a swimming pool in because the groundwater is in such a fragile state. My client has had yellow tap water several times since the construction began, which we believe underscores the fragility of groundwater quality in this area. So like the prior speaker, we appreciate the changes made to the minor modification. And while we have a couple of concerns and requests with respect to that application, we urge the commission to deny the request for an amended order of conditions to include the plunge pool.
Thank you. Any further comments from interested parties? Mark.
Thank you, Chairman Golding. I guess I have a question for the abutters, or maybe for Jeff too. This is not in a floodplain, I don't believe, so I'm not quite sure I understand the concerns with flood water or the pool being overrun by flood water, which is always our concern in a floodplain. So could the that be clarified for me?
Sure. So the flood concern that I spoke to has to do with the fact that that the plunge pool would be displacing at least 720 cubic feet of pervious substrate, and it would be occupying that space with obviously a non-pervious object. So we feel that particularly with rising sea levels and increasing severity and frequency of severe weather, this would jeopardize the ability of that area to funnel groundwater into the adjacent wetland.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? Linda? If you could hold your water, Linda, no pun intended, because I think Mark wanted to follow up.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Chairman Golding. I guess again, for the abutters, all the houses here are on wells. And I spent a lot of time in Wallwinnet as a misspent youth. And I don't recall any water problems out in the Wallwinnet area, aside from the houses past the Wallwinnet house were on a joint well, but the houses that are on the west side of the Wallwinnet house are all on their own wells with, to my knowledge, no problems with their water or water volume or water quality.
Thank you, Mark. So if Linda and Seth could hold on for a second, I'm going to ask Jeff to weigh in.
I'm not gonna weigh in per se, that's your guys' job. I was just gonna mention the mention of flood control also directly relates to one of the interests protected within the section of the regulations focused on bordering vegetated wetlands. In that list is flood control, and if you go through the definition of kind of the preamble to that through vegetated wetlands, as it talks about wetlands' ability to absorb and bring in floodwaters and take those in, as it's one of the primary functions of vegetated wetlands. So that's where that terminology kind of directly stems from.
Yeah, and just to answer that a little bit more detail. So the drainage that's being proposed as part of the project is above and beyond what is required for a single family residential development. We feel that the proposal will not result in any adverse impacts to the BVW itself and or impair any of its functions or interests. Don Bracken is on the line and can weigh in or expand upon the drainage aspects in more detail, but again, I think we've complied on that end.
So before Don weighs in, I'm going to recognize Linda and then Seth so that Don can answer them if necessary as well. Thank you, Don. Linda?
Well, thank you for those last two comments from Jeff and from Don. I was sort of going down the same road that Mark was going down. I'm not a pool person. I don't like pools, but we have a certain jurisdictional issue, and I understand what the neighbors' concerns are. I don't see what it could be something else impervious that sits there besides a pool. I'm having difficulty saying that we don't have to approve this. So I'm sort of running down the same road with Mark.
Thank you, Linda. Seth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first on the procedural side related to DEP's policy on amended orders of conditions. And I'm going to ask Jeff to back me up or help me out here since he's been doing it a lot longer than I have. But it's my understanding that conservation commissions are given a very wide discretion about how to, actually handle DEP policy. So DEP sets the policy, but confers the actual implementation of that policy to the local commissions. And I think that there is obviously a discussion, a thematic discussion that people could have around, does plunge pool create a impact that's more than minor. And if the commission would like to have that conversation, I mean, I think it would satisfy that procedural issue. But I do think that routinely and historically, there have been many amended order of conditions requests for pools that have come through this commission and have been approved. I will be the first person to say that precedent does not exist in the Conservation Commission. I have said it many times, and that nothing that happens in the past or we do right now, binds any commissions to future decisions. But it is true that pools have typically fallen within the amended order of conditions request. So, Jeff, does that sound reasonable?
I think you explained that pretty well.
Thank you. And then a substance-based issue, or really a question for the applicant. So, given the concerns related to groundwater issues or potential impacts of adding the impervious surface of the pool into the ground, has the applicant considered alternative pool designs such as an elevated pool or above ground pool, or a pool set into that patio area that is shown on the plan? I know we're talking about a relatively shallow pool and a relatively small pool. And certainly we've seen other designs come through the commission that have shared some of those characteristics in recent months. So I was wondering if that has been considered, and if not, could it be considered? Thank you.
I'll start answering that and then turn over to Don, but thanks for the question. I don't think there's any net gain there at the end of the day, frankly, because I think so. We've determined that groundwater was not encountered down to 10 feet. So there's no flood storage capacity lost here. We're not within a coastal flood zone. We're not within an inland flood zone. The wetland is greater than 50 feet away from the proposed pool. We would anticipate all the typical conditions to ensure the protection of the wetlands and interests. It's relatively shallow comparatively, and we feel that the drainage that's designed is above and beyond what would typically be required for a single family residential project, and it will help recharge the wetlands and protect those interests. And Don, I don't know if you would like to expand upon that at all.
Yes, I'd like, present a few facts. First of all, the groundwater in this area, according to the town's groundwater maps, is around elevation 3. And when we did our test pits, we didn't hit any groundwater down to elevation 11, as Brian said. Also, it's an existing deep foundation with no sumps or drainage. There's no groundwater in the foundation itself. And the bottom of the footings for the foundation is around elevation 7, which would put it roughly about 4 feet above the town's groundwater maps. But also the bottom of the proposed pool is at elevation 11. So we've already dug down to elevation 7, put in a full foundation. Now we're asking to put in the shallow plunge pool that's going to be about the excavation for that is going to be about 4 feet higher than what was already excavated for the foundation. So we certainly don't anticipate any groundwater issues. There are very tight, some impervious soils on the top layers that run about 5 to 7 feet deep, probably what's supporting that wetland system that we did find when we did the test pits, and I think there was some evidence of that when they did the foundation. So the soil factors below that, they're all fine to medium to coarse sands, and the site is well drained once you get underneath those restrictive layers in the first 5 or 6 feet. So we also don't see, from a technical standpoint, how the pool could impact the well. Our own well is that's been installed that will be used for the site is closer than any of the neighbors' wells. It's only about 10 feet away, but again, we're pretty confident that, we wouldn't, risk anything for our clients' use of the well either. So the bottom line is going to be very little excavation compared to what has already taken place and stabilized. And we don't feel there'll be any negative impacts from the pool itself. And as far as the drainage from the pool, we're also including drainage in the patio area. That's going to go to the dry wells as well. So like Brian said, pretty much any impervious surface or semi-impervious surfaces are going to be collected and infiltrated, which will also take advantage of those good soil conditions down below that layer that's 5 or 6 feet deep. So thank you.
Thank you, Don. So I guess that is answering your question, Seth, that they don't feel there's any need to consider any other design. Is that accurate?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, all right. And so, Ms. Grennan, you had your hand up? And you're muted, I believe.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to respond to a couple of points that were raised. So Ms. Williams mentioned that she wasn't sure how to deny the project, and I just wanted to point out that an amendment to an order of conditions is entirely discretionary, and its denial cannot be appealed. So that is the procedural aspect we're working with here. And I was also wondering if I might be able to share my screen to show the yellow water with respect to the tap water that has been flowing at 12 Plover Lane.
By all means, I think we've all seen the illustration, but please go ahead. I certainly wouldn't drink it. I'm curious as to how deep the well is from where the water comes from.
Okay. Can you see my screen, the yellow water?
Yep.
Yeah.
You can.
Happened a couple of times since construction started. So whatever excavation was already done, what clearly created some type of a subsurface disruption that altered the chemistry of this water. The Wagners are in the process of getting this tested to see why it's yellow, but I just wanted to respond to the comment that, it's unclear what the connection to the adjacent wells would be. I mean, I'm not a hydrologist, but clearly something's going on with the excavation that changed the color of the neighbor's tap water.
Well, so Mike, go ahead, please. I believe you're muted. Okay, we'll wait. So Seth, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for showing the picture of the tap water. I certainly wouldn't drink that. I wouldn't even use it topically, but it does. There is a concern here because we can't necessarily connect that to the activities happening at 14 Plover Lane. There's a number of reasons why tap water could be discolored. It could be issues at the 12 Plover Lane property. It could be piping issues. It could be sediment differences, or very, very well could be due to activities and construction happening on neighboring property. But without more like testing, which I'm glad your client is doing, or proper hydrology study, as a scientist, I think it's very unwise to go straight to connecting an impact on a neighboring property to a change on another property. It's the whole issue of correlation does not equal causation. It's certainly possible, but I don't think we should accept that as scientific record at this point.
Thank you, Seth. And Mike, I see your hand is down. So is that what you were going to say?
Well, Seth said it much better than I was going to say, but yes, it was of that nature. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, and glad that you've got the mute button figured out on that. So, Ms. Grennan, I was curious as to how deep the well is. I don't suppose you know?
I don't have that at this
What?
time, but I'm happy to look into it and provide that information to the commission.
Well, Dawn, did you raise your hand?
You're muted.
I'd like to know from Ms. Grennan was that water sample taken from a new well that was just driven? Because wasn't your client's well on this property at one point and it had to be moved?
It looks like Mr. Wagner actually just appeared. So Mr. Wagner may be in a better position to answer those questions.
And the only reason I ask that is because oftentimes with new wells, you do get discoloration until all the fines and silts work their way through. That, you know, initially some of those silts and fines will get through the screen that sucks the water out. And then eventually it sucks all the fines and silts within that area, and then the water clears up. So that would be my only guess as to what would be causing the discoloration.
Thank you, Don. Mr. Wagner?
Apologies, I was trying to raise my hand. I couldn't find the button. Yeah, so just to clarify, the well that we use for the house is a well that's existed on the property for past 20-25 years. So that has not changed. In the properties were owned at one point by the same owner, and they had decided to install an AC cooling system using the well on the neighbor's property that was dismantled during the construction process. But it did not affect that. We did not drill a new well yet for any reason. We have not figured out a solution for the AC issue at the house at this point. I will say that in addition to the yellow water, it happened on a couple of occasions. We've been at the house for 3 years now. We've never had that issue until this year. And it wasn't just yellow. Sometimes we would come home and it would smell like fish. So we are having it tested. We're having a system put into it. I don't know the depth of our current well, but we have noticed issues with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, I was just gonna throw in really quickly for my brethren that sit in the downstairs of this building. I'd say if people are having problems or questions or concerns about their drinking water, if they haven't already, please contact the Board of Health. If you need contact information for them, feel free. I know everyone's emailed me in the window right now. I can say everyone here has emailed me at least once. So feel free to reach out. I can get you connected with our health staff that deals with those. Obviously, we want everyone to have good, clean drinking water wherever they are, and they can provide help if you haven't contacted them already.
Thank you, Jeff. So I suppose I have two concerns. I absolutely agree with Seth as he expressed correlation and causation are not necessarily mutually intertwined. But on the other hand, I wouldn't like to close off an avenue of appeal to the applicants if it turns out that there is a correlation. So I wonder whether, Brian, you would consider, well, I guess this is either for you, Brian, or for my fellow commissioners, to what extent they feel that it would be equitable to ask that the client that you come back for an NOI, so that if it turns out that there is actual proof that this is disturbing the well, then the abutters have further recourse. Do you see my point?
I do clearly, yeah. I mean, the discretion is entirely in the commission's lap. I think we've made a strong case based on the regulations and the standards to be applied that the project complies with all regulations. And I see Jeff and Linda's hand raised, but I mean, I think we would ask that the commission vote on the amendment request. And certainly if that does not pass, then we would have to file new notice.
No, I think we all agree that you're within your rights here. But Linda, do you mind if Jeff goes first?
No, that's fine.
Jeff?
I was just gonna say, again, I mentioned my earlier comment as well, and kind of referenced that. If there's a belief that a construction project or an impact on a site is having an effect on a drinking water well or a potable water source, the regulations that cover that kind of impact are pretty squarely within the health department to regulate. We're not a body that regulates the potable nature of a drinking water well. We're a board that regulates environmental impacts to wetland resource areas and their buffer zones. The Board of Health and Health Department are the appropriate venue for a discussion of whether or not an activity is causing damage to a drinking water well. Especially one that's not on the property that we have in front of us. I think if those concerns are valid or data shows that that's the case, I think that's the right spot to take that up. I certainly think that would also be something that would be of interest to the building permit and the building commissioner, as they also require and have certain requirements for water related to the issuance and maintenance of that building permit. But I'm not sure that we're equipped one way or another to regulate the drinkability of water. I mean, I know I don't want people to drink bad water either, or yellow water. I just don't think we have the regulatory authority to make decisions based upon whether or not that water is consumable or not. It's not something that's within the act or the bylaw.
Thank you, Jeff. And Linda?
That's exactly where I was headed. So Jeff said it for me.
Thank you. So Brian, it's basically your call. If you wish to close or if you wish to come back under a notice of intent.
I think we'd like to close, please.
Okay. And Ms. Brennan?
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that private water supply actually is a statutorily protected interest under the State Wetland Protection Act. So that's why we raised that point, because an amended order of conditions is, according to state policy, appropriate where the impact on protected interests will be either the same or diminished. And we feel that this increases the impact on the adjacent wetland and on the protected statutory interests. So that's why we are pointing out the yellow water situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Seth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And sorry to get very technical here, but I hear your point, Mrs. Grennan, on the private and public water supply, which are both protected interests in the bordering vegetated wetlands area of the WPA and the Nantucket regulations. But the Wetlands Protection Act protects land. It protects the land underwater bodies. Like if we have a great pond, we actually have no regulatory authority over the water column itself, only the land under that water column. If we have a bordering vegetated wetland, we don't have regulatory authority over the water in the wetland, only the land upon which that water sits. So unless the impact can be tied to a direct impact of land, the private and public water supply performance standards doesn't apply. You have to prove that specific alteration of land is leading to a specific impact to private and public water supply, or in this case, private water supply. I believe your reasoning here is that past, excavation and construction on that site has caused something, but we would need some type of additional proof to show that's true. And also in this case, actually, it's what we would need is proof that the proposed changes in the amended order of conditions request will either continue to cause those changes or somehow exacerbate the issue. So it's a little bit more nuanced than just water's becoming, not potable. That is not our regulatory focus. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the burden of proof is actually on the applicant to show that it wouldn't be increasing the impacts, but I take your point. Thank you.
Ms. Kaufman.
Thank you. I would like to make a final comment not related to the water issue, as the Meadows property is not part of that. I think I mentioned in a last meeting that under the proposed bylaw changes, this wouldn't be allowed under the definition of a structure. Just any impervious surface in this area. I just want to note that while it's not within the 25-foot buffer zone, it's obviously right up against that, and is a significant increase in impervious surface from the original NOI. So just ask that it's denied on behalf of the abutters. Thank you.
Thank you. So unless my fellow commissioners wish to make a motion, I guess, to deny this amended order of conditions. I think from what Jeff has had to say and what Seth has had to say is going to influence my vote. So, Seth?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm sorry to break up the procedure here, but if we are moving towards a positive motion, I don't know if we are or not, but theoretically, if we are, could we discuss the conditions that would accompany this amendment prior to issuing it? Because there are clearly conditions that we'd want to apply in this case. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. A very intelligent suggestion. Jeff?
Yeah, I would suggest, obviously, step number one, if you guys feel that you're ready and have all the information you need to make a decision. I think this is one where you would procedurally start by closing the public hearing by vote. I think it sounds like there's going to be some discussion of conditions, so I think we could discuss those, and we could certainly take those conditions and draft an order one way for the other, and then have a full discussion over that draft order at the meeting on the 26th, if that's the prerogative of the board.
It's certainly my feeling on the subject. Does anybody else not feel that way?
You need a motion to close the public hearing, Mr. Chairman?
And are you making it, Linda?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. And is it being seconded? Thank you, Michael. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mizzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. So thank you, Ms. Kaufman, and thank everybody who spoke on this behalf, Ms. Grennan and Mr. Wagner. And
If I may, Mr. Chairman, if you guys would like to discuss what conditions you would like a part of this, or if you would like a favorable order or that would be helpful for preparing for the next part of this discussion on the 26th.
I think that if we had a favorable order, I certainly would hope that we would be able to take in to account the abutters considerations as much as we can within the lawful requirements of our regulations. And I don't really see any appetite for denial. Does anyone want Jeff to entertain a denial on this? So seeing none, I think just to try and take into account the abutters concerns as much as possible.
All right, just raise my hand. If I may, it sounded like Seth had some interest in some potential conditions for this. I'd be happy to entertain what those might be. So I think they would be helpful to include in a draft.
Great. Seth, would you like to reach out to Jeff afterwards?
I can, or do you want me to say them now?
Sure.
All right. Thank you. So I'd hope that we would apply obviously all the standard pool conditions. And then I think that given the equipment that is being asked for, pool equipment, generator, things like that, we should ask them to be auditorily shielded so as to not cause impacts to migratory wildlife.
Thank you, Seth.
Okay, I think I can put that together for the meeting on the 26th for you guys to review with those suggestions.
Thank you, Jeff. So that moves us on to requests for determination of applicability. And the first one is MAC 181B Pulpus Road. And David Haynes is back at bat.
Like a bad penny, like a bad penny.
Oh, come now. A golden sovereign, David, a golden sovereign.
And just to bring up another well issue, this is a request for determination to install a well for an existing house. The property was recently subdivided and they need to relocate a well that was jointly shared to each with their own well on their own property. This is a property that we had permitted back in 2007. We did the wetland delineation at that time. We've since reviewed that delineation. Installation of the well, it's greater than 50 feet from the wetland boundary. It's on the other side of a driveway. There's an isolated wetland in the northeast corner of the property. And it's in the lawn on the other side of the driveway. And then there's a short connection to the existing water line that cuts through the driveway. Work is all outside of 50. It's very minor in nature. It's all an existing lawn or driveway. And it will be over before it's done. And so we're asking for this to be done as a request for determination.
Thank you, David. So, any questions from commissioners? And seeing none, Jeff, I believe you suggested a +2 confirming boundaries and a -3 allowing for work without an NOI.
You got it.
Well, thank you for providing the crib sheet. So
Also move.
thank you, Mark. And a second, please. Thank you, Michael. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Jeff Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. And that brings us on to, so thank you, David.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. That brings us on to, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Bogan, 6 South Cambridge Street, Art Gasparo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm before the commission tonight with a request for determination of applicability associated with the upgrade of a existing septic system. There's no increase in capacity. We're adding an IA component, a new septic tank, and replacing the soil absorption system. The leaching component will be outside of the 100-foot buffer zone. But the work within your jurisdiction would include some grading, as well as the crushing and filling of the old tanks and installation of the new septic tank and new processor. I believe the project would further the interests protected by the commission, and be happy to address any questions or concerns that you might have.
Thank you, Art. Any questions? And seeing none, Jeff, I believe you made the identical recommendation.
Yes, sir.
So do I hear a motion to approve? Thank you, Joe. And a second, please. Thank you, Mike. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. So this brings us on to minor mods. And we have before us ACTU LLC 14 Plover Lane. Brian Madden representing it again. Hello.
Thanks so much. So to keep this short, the minor modification request is for the patio final configuration, the steps, lawn landscaping, the final location of the generator, the hedgerow along the southerly property boundary, and modifying the driveway for the final driveway drainage considerations. This does not include the proposed pool or the proposed pool equipment. So we just separated this out. And I'll turn it over to questions.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions? Any questions from members of the public? And seeing none, do we have everything we need on this, Jeff?
Yes, I would say that this qualifies as a minor modification.
So a motion to approve the minor mod as proposed. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Mike. By roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. Which brings us on to Nantucket Wales End and LLC 43 and 45 Squam Road. Brian?
Thanks so much. Brian Madden from LEC representing the applicant. These proposed minor updates include some new domestic potable irrigation and geothermal wells and the associated lines. There's a generator and transformer upgrading of the 50-foot buffer zone. Everything's within the previously approved limit of work. And no changes there and no waivers required. And I'll turn over to questions.
Thank you. Any questions? And seeing none, we have a motion to approve. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Mike. By roll call vote, Mike Beal,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. And that brings us on to
Thank
the,
you.
thank you. This brings us on to Nantucket Island Land Bank, 21 and 27 Sanctuary Road. Rachel Freeman. Good evening, Rachel.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is Rachel Freeman, and I'm representing the Nantucket Islands Land Bank tonight on a minor modification request to expand a boardwalk that we built. It's ADA compliant, and it stretches from Quidnet Road or Sacajah Road down to Sacajah Pond. And we have had asks to add a bench on the right-hand side so that people could go down the boardwalk and sit. So that is an actual increase of 60 square feet. And our plan is to add a freestanding bench on the east side of the boardwalk. There's pictures in the minor modification request, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Seth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Rachel. So respectfully, I'm wondering why it wouldn't make more sense to have the bench included in the layout of the boardwalk. The whole intent is this to be an ADA boardwalk, so people needing accessibility accommodations, if the bench was freestanding on the sand, wouldn't really be able to access it as well as if it was included in the footprint of the boardwalk. So I think it would personally makes more sense to have it on the boardwalk. Thank you.
Rachel.
Happy to answer that. I mean, freestanding is, it's shown on the plans. It's basically immediately adjacent to the boardwalk. It's just not directly attached. So you will not have to leave the boardwalk to get to the bench. It's probably more of a maintenance issue. What we try and do is not over complicate things so that in building, with all due respect, like in building, if we attach it to the boardwalk, then if there's maintenance required on the boardwalk, then we end up having to deal with the bench as well. So if we can just keep the two adjacent to each other so that while the bench is not attached to the boardwalk, but yet accessible from the boardwalk, that's purely the reason that it was done that way. I'm sure of it.
Thank you. And Seth, are you satisfied?
Yeah, I mean, I think it looks like on the plan, it's just this rectangle, so it's hard to tell, but I guess I hear what Ms. Freeman's saying, that if somebody required an accommodation such as a wheelchair, they could back up from the boardwalk onto that bench. So as long as that's true, I think that's fine.
Not even a hop, skip, and a lurch, right, Rachel?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you for asking, Seth, and thank you for clarifying it, Rachel. Linda, do you have a question?
No, I was just going to clarify it further that if it was on the boardwalk would have to be substantially wider than what they're proposing, because you have to have a certain distance of the path of travel. So if they have to maintain the path of travel and put the bench on the boardwalk, that boardwalk's going to expand by probably 4 feet.
Thank you. So if there are no further comments, motion to approve this as minor mod. Thank you, Joe. And a second, please. Thank you, Mike. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal.
Aye.
Seth Engelborg.
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli.
Aye.
Joe Plendowski.
Aye.
Linda Williams.
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. So that brings us on to certificates of compliance. Lottie Leshley, QPRT, 65 Squam Road. And there are two.
I think you could take them both at the same time, Mr. Chairman, for both this pair and the next pair.
Oh, okay.
Just to kind of expedite it along. So the first set for 65 Squam Road, one of them was for some work on the existing structure and some cantilever decks. Those were completed in compliance. And then the other order was for the installation of a new septic system with the tanks up by the house. The sewer line runs from the house, the length of the driveway to the only area on the lot outside of 100, right against Squam Road. All of that work has been completed for both projects. Both projects are in compliance, and we're recommending that both those certificates can be issued with no need for ongoing conditions.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. A motion to approve the certs as issued. Thank you, Joe. Seconded by Mike. Thank you, Mike. By roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Misrelli,
Aye.
Joe Plendowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. And then that brings us on to 5 Sherburne LLC, 2 more certificates of compliance. And Jeff, if you'd care to fill us in.
Sure. So these were both, again, for separate projects. One of them was for, and Art can correct me if I mess this up order-wise. I don't think it makes a difference. One of them was for work. There was a existing house that was there. Oh, he just came in the waiting room. Hopefully I didn't summon it back. There was the removal of a structure and then the rebuild of a house and work that was done there. The other portion was for the abandonment of an existing asphalt path down the bank, and that has been abandoned and has grown back in and been replanted on a couple spots. Again, both are in compliance and both don't require any further ongoing conditions.
Great. Thank you. And a motion to approve is issued. Thank you, Joe. And seconded by Mark. Thank you, Mark. By roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Marzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Plendowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. So that brings us on to orders of conditions. And I think the first one is the Mark Gottwald Family Trust, 4R Jefferson Avenue.
Yes. So just a reminder, we closed this last time. This was the lot down in kind of the Jetties Beach area where they were relocating 2 structures vertically and then 1 structure pulling it out of the zoning setback to get compliant. They're revegetating a portion of vegetated wetland that was already within the existing lawn and adding some stairs. So it didn't really have a lot of conditions from the discussion. I included an annual report with photographs for the restoration area, and then a simple requirement that construction materials to be stored outside the 50-foot setback. But I'm certainly open to suggestions. Sorry, I forgot to share my screen.
You forgot what?
To share my screen.
Well, thank you. You did send them out this afternoon.
Yes, but still like to have it up. That way, if we make any changes, people can see them.
Thank you.
But if people have had a good look, I'll add them to share and we can go from there.
Any suggestions? And seeing none, a motion to approve is drafted. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Mike. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Plendowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. And that brings us on to Killen at 1 Old North Wharf.
Sure. So we did this one tonight. This is the one that was the first one we heard this evening. I just had our standard fill condition, and then I revised our condition for exterior lighting where we normally say to be directed away from the resource area. In this case, where the resource area is only plants subject to coastal storm flowage. I just made sure that it was in compliance with the town code, chapter 102. It's hard to direct it away from just the earth, so.
Right. Right.
Or we probably want it to go down to that case and not up, and kind of counterproductive.
Exactly. So, a motion to approve if drafted, please. Mark and Joe. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Jeff Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Pandowski,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye, and Linda Williams recused.
Oh, I recused, yeah.
Okay, this time I remembered Linda.
That's good.
All
I
right,
forgot.
this brings us on to 64 Baxter Road Realty Trust, 63 Baxter Road.
Yes, the epically confusing string of 64 Baxter Road Realty Trust.
Yeah.
For different addresses. This is the one on the ocean side of Baxter Road. I did have one correction that I made. I apologize, I missed this because I let the plan of record when I was comparing the narrative and the plan confused me today and looked at the old order. The relocation of the main structure is already permitted, so they're only relocating one structure, which is actually across the street, onto this lot. And the pools and patio. So I corrected that from 2 to 1 in the permit overview. Other than that,
Okay,
it's our pretty standard pool conditions.
thank you. Any suggestions? And seeing none. Do I hear an approval?
Motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Excellent, thank you, Mike. And seconded by Joe. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Jeff Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Pandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. And that brings us on to 64 and 66 Baxter Road Realty Trust, 64 and 66 Baxter Road.
So this order was just for the construction of the structure and the pool. So I have our standard pool conditions. One additional finding that we did have is there is another structure shown on the plan of record. But it's outside of jurisdiction. So I just called that out in the finding that that's the case. So our building department will be happy. Other than that, it's pretty much our normal pool conditions.
Great. Always a good idea to keep the building department happy.
Well, people get hung up. If you don't call out all of the structures on the permit, I get did you guys look at that structure? And I say it's outside of jurisdiction. And they're like, how are we supposed to know that? I'm like, well, look at the plan of record. You see it's on the other side of the line, but
Okay,
I keep it simple.
there we go. So on that note, a motion to approve is drafted. Thank you, Joe. And seconded by Mike. Thank you, Mike. By roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Pandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. So there's no extensions of orders. And so under other business, we come to the SBPF geotube removal discussion, including potential dates. So,
Would you like me to help with this for a minute, Mr. Chairman?
any help gratefully received, Jeff?
Sure. So if you guys remember from the last meeting, we had just received the final set of, it's weird to say design plans for the removal, but the design plans for the removal, the 100% set have been submitted by SBPF. They were submitted on time. But I know we are hoping to get some time to review those. We continued the removal date, which was supposed to be today, to the next meeting on the 26th to kind of have this discussion and where it would be. Obviously, for those who've been following along in the news, there's been some interest in the town more proper engaging in a little bit of a dialogue regarding the geotubes and what they may be in the future. I think that's kind of tangentially related, but I think before you guys tonight, obviously, is kind of a discussion of removal and those plans and what it would be. Or if people have questions they want to get out on the table, they certainly can. But I think the aim tonight was to kind of at least accept those plans and say those seem to do the job that we're looking for. There's a couple details to work out as far as, you know, site conditions at the end. And then obviously kind of a time frame that would be there. But I also think that it's also prudent to be aware of the fact that the town itself has kind of talked about some potential wrinkles to hold this, and you guys certainly can, you know, have the legal right to continue with removal. That's been affirmed by a judge, so no one's saying you don't. But I also just wanted to make sure everyone was aware that that was going on, and that may definitely influence or at least come up during part of the discussion, either through public comment or you know, from the permit holders representatives. So just wanted to kind of get all the information out on the table up front. I know Meredith from SPPF is here. She just magically appeared on camera, so it's nice to see you, Meredith. And Vince Murphy from the town is also here to represent the town. And I also believe that Stephen Cohen is here on behalf of SPPF. He's also waiting, so we have kind of the whole crew, and I know there's some interested members of the public as well. So hopefully that catches you up for where you're at, Mr. Chair. Happy to answer any questions you have for me. But that's where we are.
Thank you, Jeff. And let me see, Linda, I see your hand up.
I just wanted to put it on the table that at some point, I know we have to hear everybody, but at some point I wanted to make I'll be making a motion to delay the geotube removal and put it out 6 months to give the town more time to deal with that road and to see what the town comes up with an NOI. And I think that's only proper. So that's the motion I'm going to be making, Mr. Chairman, at some point when you feel it's we've had enough discussion.
Thank you, Linda. And Mark, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Ian. Along those lines, if we're going to extend this open-ended, we should address the sand deficit. I just can't believe we're going to keep extending it and not have sand, which protects the updrift and downdrift other beaches. I mean, the whole idea of the geotubes to have sacrificial sand, and if no one's going to put the sand on, we can't keep extending ad nauseum. That's my thought, anyway.
Thank you.
I'm curious to hear other thoughts.
Well, Joe.
Yes, at the last meeting, the issue came up that 3 structures would have to be removed before work took place. Have we learned anything in the last 2 weeks about that?
Not that I'm aware of, Jeff, but I don't see that as a precondition on our part, that they need to be removed. So, and I agree with Mark that now I believe the sand deficit, and correct me if I'm wrong, Vince or Jeff, but I believe it's close to 100,000 cubic yards. And and I gather from the drone photographs that we've received that there's the geotubes, the faces and the ends have been exposed with no sand for over a month. If any other commissioners have comments before we listen to members of the public. And yes, Seth.
Thank you. I would like to delay most of my comments until we hear from representatives and the public, but I would say that the applicants or the representative for SPPF, Haley and Aldrich, on their Plan B101 has in general notes 1 in bold typeface called out that prior to performing any work in these contract documents, resident structures number 93, 97, and 99 must be removed or relocated. So I do believe that if we accept these plans as is without any conditions or editing of those plans, we would be saying at the Conservation Commission level that we agree to that. So I do think that prior to accepting any plans, we do have to go through the plans, make sure that not only the engineering drawings we agree with, the timeline we agree with, but any of the notes that we agree with as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth, for making that point. And as I've repeated ad nauseum, 99 is not residential and was a former section of Sandy Whitehead's house at 97, and was, when it was moved, it had specifically on the building permit that it was not to be plumbed and that it was not to be used. And Vince, I see you nodding your head vigorously. So, and Mike, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the sand deficit, or just adding to the conversation on the sand deficit, I mean, it's not likely any of the commissioners obviously are going to be out there putting sand out. So I think it'll be just interesting to hear what the SBPF representatives want to say about that, and where we are and what that means going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And so at this point, I think for members of the public, and Meredith, I think your hand went up first.
Thank you, Chair Goldman. Sorry, my camera froze there for a second. Meredith Moldenhauer, representative of SVPF. As noted by Mr. Carlson, we do have Steve Cohen present, as well as Mark Haley. It's Mark's iPhone is where he logged in from, and he would be able to address some of the comments from regarding the necessity and their professional opinion to need to remove any of the existing homes that are on the bluff before the geotubes are removed. I'll turn to him to address those questions. In regards to the geotubes in the tow, we are working, and as Mr. Cohen indicated to the select board the other night when we were discussing the potential to refile the NOI for the expansion project, we are working to cover the tow with the existing sand that is on top of the project. And so we will obviously update Mr. Carlson when that is completed. In regards to the sand deficit, our position is that we are going to hopefully be before you with the NOI, which will be discussing to kind of right size the sand requirements and address it at that time. And so at this point, I'll turn over to Mr. Haley to address the question regarding the necessity to remove those homes for purposes of safety and environmental requirements. Mark, can you unmute yourself and address those issues?
Well, while we're waiting for him, perhaps someone else would like to comment.
Mr. Chairman, this is Stephen Cohen. I'll give you a very simple answer, which is that, and Mark can give a more technical answer if necessary, but I don't know that it actually requires one. The need to delay removal of the geotubes until the homes are removed is based partially on the safety of the inhabitants of those homes, but also based on the environmental impact to the beach and marine mammals and public that would take place if those homes went over the bluff. I don't think that anybody on the commission likes it when houses and septic systems and other hard elements fall down into the ocean and are on the beach and are then get caught up in the littoral system. I know, years ago there was some geotube bags, not from this project, from a different project, that actually got caught up in the engine system of I think it was the steamship, or it might have been the High Line. But my point is that avoiding all that debris, as well as other public and environmental disasters that would come from having those homes go over the cliff, is something that I think is important for this commission to keep in mind, and that ordering the geotubes removed without a plan in place for the removal of the houses would be both irresponsible and creating a significant negative, predictable significant negative impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. But would you agree that so those were bought recently, right, by the same person, and he's been on notice for some time, and that so wouldn't you agree that it would have been prudent of them to have made plans by this juncture? And is there any reason why we couldn't order a date to have them removed or demolished?
So I don't represent those owners. I'm certainly not going to judge them on their prudence. I appreciate your point that they're on notice. And I think that if the commission or the town wants to take action to force that, then that's something that the commission or the town should do. It's certainly not something that SBPF is in a position to do.
I stand corrected.
And then Steve, could I, this is Mark Haley, could I add to that? Can you all hear me?
Yes,
We
we
can.
can hear you.
Thank you. So we met with the homeowners and we met with the building inspector for the town. And he indicated at that time, he cannot say that the houses are not inhabitable at this point in time. However, when the geotubes are removed, he would have to declare these houses have to be moved or be demolished once the geotubes are removed. And that's why it says there that my plans call for them being removed before the fact, so that he has a chance of potentially moving them. But once those geotubes are removed, one of those houses, which is only 2 foot from the top of the cliff, is probably a demolition, because you don't have enough room to move it. Does that help the commission?
Thank you, Mark. Mark Beal, as commissioner, has a question.
No, just a comment. I think if we do in fact set a hard day for removal, it'll put the homeowners on notice that they have to act. We can't force them to move their houses, but we can definitely put them on notice that we're going to be removing the geotubes, and there's potential for some erosion and maybe not. But I think you put them on notice, particularly when they're, well, I shouldn't say new buyers, it doesn't really matter. But I think that on notice would be the important thing, and to give them plenty of notice if need be. But I just think we can't be ordering people to move. The town can, but we can't. Vince, you're shaking your head.
So Vince, would you like to reply to Mark or add to his comment?
Apologies for my head shaking. Mark Haley said it already.
Okay.
I was standing about 6 feet on the other side of the homeowners from Mark Haley when he explained when the building inspector said exactly as Mark Haley said. There's no reason for the town to currently order the removal of these properties, as they're structurally sound. They're on top of a bluff. There's no imminent need that he can see. So we're in a chicken and egg scenario of how would that happen? So I'm only kind of repeating Mark, but from what the building inspector said, there's no way for the town to force them move at the moment.
Thank you.
Just to piggyback that, I think that the question before the commission is slightly more narrow, which is just whether or not you're approving the plan. And as Seth noted, that note is in the plan. So if the commission wanted to approve it that way, they could. And if the commission wanted to approve it, striking that note, that's your prerogative. I will say that for SBPF, that SBPF will not engage in removing the geotubes until that issue is resolved, because it would create such sorry, my dog is here, would create an environmental issue with the houses going over the edge, and that obviously needs to be dealt with. It's a complication here.
And not just that, I just want to add, I think Mr. Haley can identify.
Please hold your horses, Meredith, and I want to recognize Seth first, and then you may have your turn. Thank you. Seth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do agree with Mr. Cohen that, it is the commission's discretion to make edits or approve the plan as we see fit. This happens all the time. Plans come in and they get modified. I would say we are somewhat talking in theoreticals without tying impacts to any performance standards. And I would caution us against doing that. There are specific performance standards for coastal banks. Some of them I personally believe are relevant here. Some of them are not. And although Mr. Cohen painted a vibrant picture of environmental disaster and things that I think nobody who's a rational person wants to happen, there isn't necessarily a strict tie to saying that removing this particular coastal engineering structure will lead directly to that. There are procedures in the plan to disperse the sand from the tubes onto the beach, leading to additional storm damage prevention capability. How long will that last? It's unclear. Will it last as long as a geotube array? It's unlikely. But I think that in order to do some of these things really in a robust way that is related to the Wetlands Protection Act and to the Nantucket local bylaw, we do need to make sure that any theoretical impacts are tied back to relevant performance standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. And so Meredith, if you have something to add that you haven't said before, please do so. Otherwise, I'm going to recognize Dennis Murphy.
I would just say that our expert, Mr. Haley, has indicated that, this is a requirement based on his professional opinion in order for them to maintain and stay on as engineer of record. And so that would obviously be our position, that you would approve the plans as our professional engineer has recommended.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. For those of you who were not on during the original GeoTube hearings a few years ago, I'm Dennis Murphy. I represent the Green Hill family on Hoyks Hollow. I submitted a comment letter last Friday, and I just want to reiterate, based on the discussion tonight, a few points. We're not in a situation where you all are dealing with a clean slate. This was a matter that was a final order that was appealed to a court of law, which issued a final judgment, which was not further appealed. And even SBPF, and their lawyer is here, will acknowledge that's a lawful final order. I don't think we're free to disregard it. I certainly try not to do that in my practice. That's known as contempt. I think that you do have some discretion in approving a plan for removal and the timetable. But on behalf of my clients, who, as you know, engaged a very reputable expert who has been studying the impact to the resource area on the beach, including my client's property, have a geotube structure on the beach without proper mitigation that is causing harm to the resource area. And so I know the story you're getting from the other side is that the sky will fall. But for the last 2 years, the project has not been properly maintained. It was already in a deficit. And so what I would ask is that you amend the plans in a way that's acceptable to the commission, whether you follow Mr. Beal's comment about giving them a hard date about the removal, or you simply strike the note and move on so that this can be effectuated. I understand that there is a a movement afoot to come back with an expansion again. It starts to feel a little like deja vu because almost a year ago, there was, I think, a letter from the commission that they would be willing to engage in what you've been doing for the last year, that is suspend the removal, but on condition that there be no request for an expansion. That's your own October 24th letter from last year, page 2, paragraph 2. And so I would urge the commission to follow its own letter of what they said, which is proceed with effectuating the removal. That's been upheld by the court. That's final. And it's a separate matter what comes before you, or it may or may not come before you in the future, and you'll deal with that if and when the time comes. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Mark Beal.
Thank you, Chairman Golding. I'm a little troubled by the inclusion of those houses must be removed caveat, because in essence, it holds us hostage to the landowners just deciding not to move the houses until they are more perilously close to the bluff. So I think that should be removed from the removal order standard. It can't stay in there, because then we'll never get the order to remove and enforce if that's going to be our plan.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Yes, and thank you, Mark, for that observation. I agree with you.
So,
Steve, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think the commission, again, is free to adopt the plan with or without the note. I just want to be really clear that if that note, which is considered to be a significant safety, public health and safety issue, as well as an environmental issue, if that happens, then Mark Haley will be removing himself as the engineer of record, because he would feel that the plan was no longer safe. And also SBPF would not be engaging in something that was the removal that we determined to be unsafe and not environmentally sound. If that happens, then the town would have two, or the commission and the town would have two options. It could take the $500,000 escrow that's in place and do the removal itself, or it could, but I think before doing that, should seek, legal advice on whether or not it has liability for doing that, and whether or not it has the legal right to remove, to order removal of those houses or those kind of things. And I think that walking down those steps is something that doesn't happen at this meeting, right? I think that, frankly, what's suggested here is, what I'm hearing is that there's a complication here that the commission may need to deal with and get more information on what are the legal issues and how would that work. And frankly, nobody on this call should be giving legal advice to the commission. So I would just want to be clear that the commission, that the SBPF is not going to be removing that term from the plan, and if the commission wants to figure out what the legal ramifications of that are, then it should definitely pursue, get that legal advice from your own attorney, and also should approve the plan that it feels is appropriate. Like, we're not arguing with you about it. It's your prerogative. Thank you.
And Dennis, did you have your hand up again?
No, I took it down. Thank you.
Okay. So, RJ, I'm going to ask Seth to precede you, please. Thank you. Seth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I certainly don't feel comfortable moving forward with, adopting a plan until we have all the information. And if this causes us to have to wait to another meeting, I am totally fine with that. I think there's two issues. There's a legal issue, and there's also a policy issue of what we want to do as a commission. But I think we should make sure that we have that information before moving forward with adopting a plan. The second question I have, and it could be for any of the representatives of SPPF, I don't know who to direct it to, but if said plans were adopted, I know these are engineering plans. Are there like active contract documents in place, and like how long would this take to get started if the plans were removed. I mean, I know there's a whole question of a new notice and all of that aside, but just assuming that we're just talking about this narrow issue for a second, are those documents in place?
So I'll respond to the second question. I agree with you, Seth, on the first, which is that the commission probably should be getting a little more information about legally how some of this would work. But on your question about the process, yes, on the idea that the soonest that the geotubes would be removed, assuming the house issue, the structure issue is not an issue, we're looking at a spring or fall of 24 removal. And in that time, we would come up with the contracts for the contractor who's been dealing with this to put that into place. And that obviously would take some time, but there's plenty of time between now and then to put that into place. So I don't see implementation as being a delay, if that's what you're asking about.
So
I could add to that.
And just for the record, I think the commission knows that money is already in escrow too.
right. So RJ,
Chair Golding, RJ Turcott on behalf of the Nantucket Land and Water Council. I think it's important context for this conversation as well, that even if geotubes stayed in place and functioned as they should, these houses are destined to go in anyways. This bluff is a pile of sand that's also eroding from the top. So every day that they stay there, they will eventually get closer and closer to the edge of the bluff. And it's important for the commission to figure out what this looks like. I know that it's being asked for more time, but it's been a decade since the emergency order to put these geotubes in, and the plans for the road relocation aren't finished. Obviously, the removal plans aren't finished. And these things need to get done before a storm really does some damage. Thank you.
thank you, RJ. Meredith?
I would just expand on what Mr. Cohen provided. We have engaged with a number of contractors. I know that Mark Haley has spoken with a few. Another one of our contacts has also interviewed and had conversations with I think of another 3. And so between, if the commission did decide to move forward with the plan as scheduled, we would obviously move forward with those discussions and be ready as proposed in Mark Haley's timeline to execute if that was necessary.
Thank you for that explanation. So, Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, looking at it, I don't see that it's unreasonable that those houses have to move. You know, it's going to take some time, but this whole thing has taken a lot of time, and I don't see engineers waiting in line to sign up for this project. And I know that it's messy, but we're going to have to deal with those houses one way or another, whether it's through the town or through the Conservation Commission, and we'll be seeking some more advice on that. But I see them as, you know, unfortunately going when the geotubes go as well, preferably before. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Seth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this might be more of a legal question that would be better to have a council present for. And if it is, we don't need to answer it. But, you know, I guess it's about what clauses would be superseding here. So if we set a date that was a hard date for this this removal to happen in next spring, and then there was a note in that plan that says those structures must be removed, would that hard date essentially compel those structures to be removed or not? And it's probably a legal question, but I think it is something we should ask council about, because, you know, if the plan says they must be removed and we say the order is happening on this date, they must be removed, does that order essentially compel those property owners to remove them or not, is my overall question.
Thank you, Seth. Mark?
Chairman Goldie, maybe it's time for us to consider what we considered several years ago of getting our own counsel, because the town is a applicant in both phases of this expansion, which isn't before us yet, so we can't talk about it. But the removal order, the enforcement order, and now with this issue of the houses, I think we may need counsel, and I don't think the town council can help us on this one because there's a built-in conflict of interest.
Thank you, Mark. I was thinking along those lines, and also as to whether the houses and removing it from the contract abrogates SBPF's responsibility, and I wouldn't have thought it would personally. And so I think that's a good question. And Jeff, Vince, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Ian. It's curious that spring was mentioned. It's probably a good time for me to give a project update, if that's acceptable to you, Ian.
Of course. Thank you, Vince.
No worries. So on the alternative access project, we've just got through the 60% design phase. We've got a lot of feedback in from residents. We should hit 90% design midwinter, January kind of time is what I'm hoping for. And we will have to go through a few more phases. The current project due date for the alternative access project is June 2023. Sorry, beg your pardon, 2024. So roughly around what, 8 months or so from now. So that would put it on par for what you're talking about. But it might be a fraction longer than that. I don't know, and I can't promise just yet, but that's certainly the date and deadline we're working towards. It's obvious, and it's been mentioned and referred to here, but the town is working with SBPF. We are starting with an extremely strong base for the notice of intent that was submitted last year. The idea is to try and get it submitted as soon as possible. We're currently targeting the November 30th submission date to get the notice of intent in good shape for that date. If it happens sooner, so be it, but that's the current date. We're also working on other parts to learn from history to try and find ways to potentially update an MOU over time to include ways of getting to deal with maintenance questions so that this wouldn't become an issue again. It's all things that we're trying to build in together to have what would be a way to retain the existing structure and potentially have a much expanded structure that would have a much stronger maintenance methodology attached to it and fix a lot of the historic issues. It would be a rollover plan of sorts and a reset for everybody.
Thank you, Vince. So I see Deanne Atherton's hand up. And Deanne,
Yes.
I wonder, would you mind if you defer to Seth?
Of course, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Vince. I do think we should refrain from talking about larger scale geographic concerns since it's not really the agenda item here. And since we don't have any submission before us, we don't want to preclude whatever would come in a new process. But I would just say that, you know, my personal opinion is that I think I've advocated for this many times in the past, that any discussion related to removal order is inherently separate from any new notices of intent that come into place. I mean, even theoretically, I know financially this probably wouldn't happen, but theoretically, the current project could be removed and then later a new notice of intent that still had geotubes in that exact same spot could be later permitted. So I think we really need to stick to this removal. In terms of a timeline, I know this has dragged out for a long time, for multiple years at this point. I do think that it doesn't make sense to rush this straight away and do it tomorrow. Winter is the absolute worst time to do construction of this nature on Nantucket, and also the most susceptible to storm damage, which storm damage prevention is one of the protected interests of coastal banks. So although it is going to cause more waiting, I am personally in favor of having the removal order be at a set specified date in the spring. I do think we should contact council and get a arrangement in place with a council, and have some of these legal answers or legal questions answered. But I think we should be quickly moving towards setting a specified date in the spring once we have those legal questions answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. And as you say, we're entering into the period of the strongest storms with a huge sand deficit and no protection on the front of the geotubes, which I find very concerning. And but I will limit my comments strictly to what we're dealing with this evening. And Deanne, thank you for waiting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would like to bring, I'm Deanne Atherton, and I am with the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy. And our focus is where it has always been, and that's the public beach below the bluff on which the geotubes sit. There is unrefuted documentation that the geotubes are causing harm to the public beach. We submitted, again, Dr. Kriebel's report for all of the commissioners, and we hope you'll take your time to review it, especially the newer commissioners. While there may be some question about whether or not harm is being caused downdrift of the geotubes, there is no question that they are causing harm to the public beach. The properties that are being protected by the geotubes, those property owners do not own this property. The inhabitants of Nantucket own it. And if you are considering not removing the geotubes until next spring, we ask you, in terms of your responsibility under the Wetland Protection Act and the Nantucket bylaw, that you require mitigation so that that public beach doesn't narrow further, lower further, and eventually disappear. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanne. So, Jeff, here we are again. And so it's sort of another Mexican standoff, although I'm not sure that's politically correct. And
we'll just call it a standoff for our
okay, another standoff.
Or just maybe this one it's more apt just for you, Ian. I'll say there's a new line in the sand. We'll go with that one instead. So,
thank you.
I understand the impasse that we're at, right? So it seems like tonight, and just kind of like looking at my notes really quickly, we have some legal questions related to the buildings. We have some timing issues related there. I think Ms. Atherton brings up some interesting questions about mitigation sand, about how that should go down and preventing any further impacts, all related to the removal. I think a lot of those are answerable questions with time. I think it makes some sense. Obviously, at the end of the day, kind of the product you guys are going to be issuing is a final removal order that comes with, kind of a set of findings and conditions that go with it and recognition of the plans that have been submitted. I think having those answered are important. I think if it's okay with you guys, I mean, we could certainly put together a request from legal services again. I think given the vote the select board took last week, I think Mark raises some interesting question about who would be representing the commission. Obviously, that comes with a price tag and dollars and cents, and I think we would need to get that squared away. I think those are all obtainable. I think at the same time, obviously the date that is set that we've been carrying and kind of pushing it forward in small steps has made some sense. I think given those questions and the timing and kind of looking at our meeting schedule where we have obviously the meeting on the 26th, we have 2 meetings in November and 1 in December because we're getting into the holiday season's coming up here too. I think the time frame for where we want to continue it to will kind of be the question now that there's some additional questions to be answered. I don't think we can get the answers to all of those questions for a discussion on the 26th of October. If we have to bring in counsel, that obviously has a process to it. So obviously we've used special counsel before. I feel like not to put it into the commission's head, but I feel like there would probably be some interest in retaining the same counsel as before if we're authorized for special counsel, just for ease of understanding the subject matter. If that's even a possibility or available. So I think those are all things that we can answer relatively quickly, but I think we need to have a real time frame for removal at this point.
Thank you. Seth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So before we get to the time frame, I would like to make a motion to authorize Jeff to submit a request for legal services for special municipal counsel.
Thank you. And I will second it.
For the day after. I'm joined now by David.
Can I make a friendly amendment or a suggestion to that?
Yeah.
Welcome, David. Your view of
Can you, will you please mute your phone, whoever is discussing something that we don't want to listen to? Thank you.
All right. I might suggest if it's possible, I'm happy to put that together. If you guys want to get that submitted sooner than later, I'm happy to get that drafted, send that around, and people can send their comments back to me, and maybe the chair could have a final review and authorization of that. Either way, I'll just fully disclose that I will not be in the office tomorrow. So I would probably get that done on Monday.
Great, thank you. Linda and then Mark.
When we make that motion, friendly motion amendment, we need to be very specific in the motion as to what we're asking town council for. Otherwise, Libby will not approve it.
Linda?
Yeah.
So first of all, we're not asking town council. And secondly, in asking for independent counsel, Jeff is going to draft the provisions which then we'll look over and send forward. And
that wasn't what I said. I'm just curious if we're going to do that, if we're going to ask for our own counsel, a special counsel, we need to be very specific in our motion as to what we're asking it for. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you, Linda.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, could I offer some free advice? You may want to seek legal.
Could I stop you?
Sure.
Sorry, Steve. Go right ahead.
I understand where the commission is coming from in seeking special municipal counsel, but I think that some of the questions before you don't require that, and you might get a faster answer by just having that question go to town council. So you may want to consider a motion that sends the question of, can you force removal of the house or some things like that. You may want to give yourself both. A request to town council and also a request for special municipal counsel. So I'll let you consider whether you want to do that.
Well, thank you, because that's an interesting point. And I can certainly think of one question where we would probably need an independent counsel. And so, Seth, would you like to amend your initial proposal to both town and independent council?
Well, I was actually trying to make two motions. Mr. Cohen sort of beat me to it, but I didn't want to have two motions on the floor at the same point. But I was going to make a second motion that should said request for legal services being denied, and we send a separate request for legal services to town council.
Okay.
Can we vote on like one at a time, I think, or?
All right. It does beg the issue of whether or not we decide to just hire an independent counsel out of our own pockets. Is there anything that precludes us from doing that, Jeff?
I mean, the commission technically has funds for professional review of filing materials and things like that. So we use to hire third-party consultants.
All right.
There may be some procurement with it. I think part of it too, right, is obviously town council holds a contract with the town to do certain things. Obviously, as an entity of the town, we're obligated to maintain the terms and conditions of those contracts. I think I can do a little bit of both if you guys give me a chance to say. I think we can outline the points that exactly we need legal review for, and I think the request that could go to them would be simply to say, can go to town council, or if there's a conflict, given the current situation with the town and the permit holder, if they would say that it would be better to go to a special counsel on their justification either way for how they decide or why there's not a conflict, at least that puts it on paper.
Okay.
And can get used. I think there's a little bit of way to, do it all at once and get it definitive and stay within the boundary that's there.
Okay, thank you. So, Seth, would you like to propose a motion that takes into account Jeff's analysis of providing instructions for both town and independent counsel according to whether or not there's conflict of interest to be reviewed by members before it's being sent to town?
Yes, I will withdraw the previous two motions and make that motion.
Thank you. Do I hear a second for that? Thank you, Mike. And yes, Jeff.
I'll wait for my comment until after you guys vote with the active motion and second. That's there. It can wait.
Okay. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal.
Aye.
Steph Engelborg.
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli.
Aye.
Joe Pandowski.
Aye.
Linda Williams.
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. So Jeff?
Yeah, just a thought that came up while that motion was floating around. I also think that there may be an opportunity here to avoid kind of something that I know a lot of us have independently talked about with at least a lot of the members of the commission have talked to me independently about it. I think there may also be an opportunity here as you guys send that request in. Obviously, that request, and as we've run into before, goes to town administration or ultimately for those who were on the board or present or participated in the process the last time we made this legal request, may ultimately end up in the hands of the select board. I wonder if there'd be some value too in trying to engage the select board in this process to participate to help resolve these issues on the removal. Simply because, just hypothetically here, and people can yell at me later if they want. whether these structures are removed now and we're dealing with this structure, especially with the buildings, or something in the future is there, whether it's geotubes or core or magic force field or whatever is there, there's going to need to be, I think we've all learned, really set and clear removal triggers and protocols, and to try to address as many of those issues up front. I'm wondering if there'd be benefit for the commission to engage the select board as property owners and also the people that control access to legal services to have a open meeting discussion about that very issue. Just a suggestion.
I would welcome it with open arms, and I'm happy to entertain a motion along those lines if my fellow commissioners feel that that would be productive. So
I'll make that motion, and I hope we have Star Wars ray shield technology at our disposal in the coming months here.
I'll second
Yeah.
that, Mr. Chairman.
I was just going there with the, the force field, with the force
There
be
we
with
go.
you type of thing.
okay, good.
I'm an optimist.
On that note, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Pandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. And now, do we need to entertain any further discussion on the removal date at this juncture, Jeff?
Well, the removal date is set for October 26th, which is when our next meeting is. I think
Right.
our past practice has been to not have the date be on the date of the meeting if we know
Right.
we're not there on the removal process. If it helps, the next regular meetings are the 26th of October, which is where it is already, the 16th of November, the 30th of November, or the 14th of December. And after that, we haven't set the schedule for 2024 yet. So, I mean, you could arbitrarily pick a date in 2024. It wouldn't matter if you guys were going to go that far, but we'll know a little bit closer.
So Linda, something tells me in my clairvoyant state that you're going to make a motion to move the removal date to sometime in the future.
Yeah, I was thinking to give the town time for us to also digest all this to March 31st. But if people want it earlier, I'll make it earlier. But that was what my original intention was.
Well, I would suggest that we choose a date that we have on our calendar, which would be December 14th. But I see that Seth has got his hand up. So Seth.
Thank you, Linda. And I totally understand the intent of your motion. And I think that ultimately we're going to get towards a date that's somewhere in that time range. But in the short term, since we have, these legal issues that we're hoping to get some clarity on in the near term, I would prefer that we just extend the current date to maybe the first meeting in November, with the hopes that we do have some of these issues clarified. And then once we have the issues clarified, then we could go to a motion to extend the date out into the spring to allow everyone the time to prepare to actually do this, because it's not going to happen overnight, obviously. Thank you.
All right. Do you want me to amend my motion? The only concern I have about amending that motion is that Jeff just said, don't put it to a meeting, put it after the meeting, in case we don't have a meeting for the tsunami comes or something.
Well,
So
that's 2 meetings from now. That's 2 meetings from now.
Yeah, but I don't want to do it to a meeting. I'd rather do it to an end of a month, so we have time during that time not to do it on a meeting.
Okay, end of November then.
Whatever that date is, 30th.
Yes, we have a meeting on the 30th.
Oh, boy.
All right. So
December 1.
All right. So
Let's stroll, everybody.
well, there you go. Let's not interrupt the stroll, Linda.
No.
you going to amend your? Well, actually, I don't think you've got any proposal to amend yet. So are you making a motion to extend the removal date till December 1st?
Okay, I'll do that for now.
And Seth, are you agreeable with that?
Yes, I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. And so thank you, everybody. Thank you, Meredith. Thank you, Steve. And thank you, Dennis. And thank you, RJ. And to be continued. So that brings us on to approval of minutes. And I think there are minutes from last April, right? Or from May?
Hey,
May. So I looked at them and didn't really remember a thing. So there we go. So I don't know if there's, perhaps I'm not the one to make the motion to approve.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seconded by Joe. So by roll call vote.
Sorry. I have some amendments that I need.
Oh, sorry. I beg your pardon.
Sorry, Seth.
That's okay. So particularly in number 9, which is on page 2, Linda Loring Nature Foundation, Inc., 90 Old Point Road, SE 483643. It shows, or maybe it's not there. It's down there on the same project, but it's on a later part of this meeting where it shows me sitting on that, but I was not sitting on that.
all right, I'll make a note of that and I'll get that corrected to make sure that you are clearly recused and not sitting on that one, if that's the case.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually on page 9, number 10.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So move to approve as amended by, now I forget, sorry.
Mike.
By Mike.
Mike.
By Mike. Thank you, Mike. And so by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. That brings us on to monitoring reports.
Don't have any.
And then enforcement actions, potential enforcement actions.
All right, so we have a couple. I'll do the first one first, and then we'll get to the other one. We're recommending, there's a house out at 10 Sheep Pond Road, which is now imperiled and is being removed, is in need of removal. It started to expose and do that. We're recommending an enforcement be issued to move that structure away. They've received similar from Health and Building already. The folks have been in touch and are intending to actually have it in the works to move it outside of the commission's jurisdiction. But we need to get that work underway. So we're recommending issuing an enforcement order ordering the building and its appurtenances and utilities removed from the eroding coastal bank.
So do I see a motion to approve an order along those lines? Thank you, Mike. Seconded by Joe. By roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. Potential enforcement actions.
Yes, so we had another one. I just wanted to put it to everyone's attention. And RJ is still here, so I can let him speak too. And it looks like Art is still here as well. RJ filed a letter with some concerns related to 21 Meter Street and the Land and Water Council. I'm still not used to that yet. I apologize. Land and Water Council's continued concerns with that site. I know some of these issues have come up before, and that site now is currently, just to recap for everybody, sitting on 2 open orders of conditions. One that's related to the construction of the rain garden and the driveway. A second order, which was more recently approved, related specifically to the construction of a single-family home and the installation of utilities on that lot. We've looked at a staff level into a couple of these issues that were raised. Again, I know during the public hearing process, one of them came up with the utilities that were run to the site and the utilities that were stubbed off into what is traditionally a septic D box on the site. And that pipe that had water that was capped, and they provided that information to us. There was some concerns related to the grading on that site. And I know we talked about that meeting that, that those are both open orders and those projects are still underway. There were some concerns for the monitoring wells to be installed under those same things. And I know we're viewing those concerns, and we definitely see the concerns from the Land and Water Council. But I think we're happy to answer your questions. I don't know if you guys have questions for RJ in regards to his letter. I certainly don't want to hog up all the time here. So I'll leave it to you guys. And then I'll provide some comments after if other people have questions or comments.
Well, all right. RJ, did you read the letter from Glenwood as a rebuttal? Did you read the rebuttal?
Yes, I have.
So it seemed to spell out for me, fairly definitively why we came to the conclusion we did in this unhappy affair. So that is sort of the way I'm looking at this juncture. So is there anything you'd like to add in terms of rebuttal to Glenwood's letter?
Yes, thank you, Chair Golding. RJ again on behalf of NLWC. This one has been a tricky one that's been going on for a few years. A couple of you commissioners have been on here for this, and we still don't feel that the issues that have arisen since 2020 have been resolved properly. The intent of the March notice of intent by this commission was to try to rectify that, and it was done in good faith, and I don't think anybody knew that there was going to be another NOI coming in right after it to prevent it from being fulfilled properly. But hindsight is 2020. So after the discussion and debate at the NOI hearings for the single family home, the latest permit, that clearly wasn't the right avenue for the commission to try to address what's gone on here. So I did some digging on behalf of NLWC to see if there is anything else that could be done to rectify the situation, and found through DEP's handbook that there is, that you have the information in hand if you were to use another enforcement order, issue another enforcement order to get that site back into compliance, because like I said, the intent of that initial permit was to try to restore that site, and an enforcement order on that permit with a cease and desist to stop all work until those wells are installed, until the grade is proper, until the vegetation at least has a chance to try to come back. The commission would be doing its due diligence here in what's been a tricky situation that's happened over multiple years. So yeah, that's sort of what the contents of the letter was. Thank you.
Thank you, RJ. Does any other commissioner wish to weigh in on this? So, Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, the way I look at it, they have 3 years to cooperate with what's in their their notice. So I feel like that's what we are tied to on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and I regretfully agree. I guess maybe I shouldn't say regretfully, I agree. So, Jeff, do you have any words of wisdom?
I don't know if they're wisdom, but I tend to agree, right? There's 2 open permits for that work to happen, and they have the full time of those permits to conduct all of that work. You know, I definitely hear the concerns of timing and things like that, and I don't necessarily disagree, but I think the permits that are in hand obviously are driving the process that are here. Obviously, we'll be keeping a close eye on this site. We've kind of added it into our regular path to finance and to get to downtown for everyone to get by here. So we're checking it on the regular. But I think that the applicants have the right to operate within their issued orders of conditions and get in compliance and apply for a certificate of compliance in the timeframes that those orders allow, just like any other application.
Thank you.
I guess, long story short, I don't feel that there's any action from the commission needed at this time.
Thank you, Jeff. And so RJ, I know that's not the answer you want. And, but there you have it, I'm afraid. So we have reports, crack. We
Tim is not here.
Thank you. I was having a senior moment, of which I'm having quite a few. He did bring crack up to speed on what was happening with SBPF. At least that's what he told me he was planning on doing. CPC?
Nothing to report except that we're starting our interviews for all the applicants next week.
Thank you, Mark. NP and EDC?
Nothing to report.
Linda, Harbor Plan?
The online survey closed at the end of September. I expect we'll get all the details when we meet, and we have a meeting on Monday. And we'll proceed from there.
And you said
they're beginning to do interviews. They're doing individual interviews with department heads and other relevant people.
Thank you. And you said you had hundreds of responses?
Jeff may have the final number, but it was almost close to 500, if not over.
It was over 500. It is the most responded to harbor plan survey that Urban Harbors has ever done.
Fantastic.
Thanks to everyone who responded.
Yeah. And Joe,
Nothing to report.
Nothing to report. Okay. Commissioners' comments.
Good meeting, Mr. Chairman, again.
Thank you, Linda. So Jeff, could we put 79 Baxter Road on for our next meeting?
Absolutely.
Good. Thank you. And then do you have any comments as administrator?
No, I think I'm good for today. Everyone have a nice weekend.
Thank you. And I second your suggestion and also look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion
So
to
moved,
adjourn.
Mr. Chairman. Second. All at once. Everybody at once.
You got a bunch of them, Ian.
Yep, I think we got it covered.
Unanimous consent.
By roll call vote, Mark Beal.
Aye.
Steph Engelborg.
Aye.
Mike Mazzarelli.
Aye.
Joe Pendowski.
Aye.
Linda Williams.
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. And special thanks to both Vince and Jeff. Thank you very much. Okay, good night, everybody.
Night.
everyone.